Hey, how you doing, James? How's it going?
I'm all right, actually. It's
Oh,
very hot
fantastic.
today. I don't think the weather knows what it's doing, but I'm not really complaining
That's
today.
fantastic. So it's a bit of a sad thing that brings us together, isn't it, James?
Well, yeah, I my father died last year, age 90,
Right.
and I used to see Gaz Mayall around Notting Hill quite a lot when I was living up there. And Mona, who lives up there still with my daughter, she said I hadn't seen Gaz Mayall for a while. I get a feeling that,
When you say
and I don't.
Casmel,
Gaz is John's son.
right?
And I have a feeling that he may have gone over to the States, and I don't know this, but I just thought maybe the old man is not so good because I heard that John he'd taken ill at a gig a couple of years ago. He'd had a funny turn and had had to cancel the show, but he just kept getting up and carrying on,
He played till he
like
dropped, didn't he?
pretty much, yeah. So I think that Gaz may have gone back out there, and Gaz did with his life kind of what John did. John, his father, set a good example of how to run a band. So
But you know,
if you don't know Gaz, he had a band called the Trojans, and
but
he ran the band, and he was doing ska music in the same way that John was doing blues music in the 60s.
but John had a female, quite a good female guitar player, didn't he, for a while? I don't know if he had her up until the end
Towards
of
the
his.
end,
Yeah,
she had a name like something Wonder, not what I can't remember her name,
yeah.
but yeah, he was still gigging. I don't know if he was calling it the Blues Breakers, but yeah, amazing. And I met him once. He was touring with Peter Green in 2020. And the idea that John Mayall and Peter Green were going to be sharing a stage together again for the first time pretty much since 1967. I think that Peter guested with him at the Bath Festival in 71, but they hadn't played together for a long, long time. And they toured together, Peter Green's splinter group with John Mayall's Blues Breakers.
And we're going to talk
And
about Peter more in depth in the second half of
yeah,
this. Yeah.
so I just, when I met John, my impression of him was he just played for 3 hours. Um, and then as I was leaving with my mate, and it was nighttime in Bournemouth, outside the BIC, the International Centre, John Mayall standing there and signing autographs for a queue of people that was stretching down the road. And he's jogging on the spot, signing autographs. Mr. Superfit, age 70 something. And I just thought, wow, okay. That's how to look after yourself. That's
Yeah,
someone
yeah.
that's someone that's been in the army and done his national service,
And he
because
was
he
very
did.
yeah, and he was very though because I mean I still work with some musicians that are a lot older than me, and there is a kind of more regimental work ethic with the older English guys. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. There's a very big difference between people that were born before 1940, I suppose, and people after. Like in the Stones, Bill Wyman was that much older than them.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
that much, but the difference between him and the other guys in the band was that he'd done his national service, and so yeah, they all considered him to be a little bit older, or he was almost like their parents' generation. And John was someone, I suppose, with people like Peter Green and Eric and all the other guys that were involved, who was like a father figure. He was an adult, and they were all kids, and he was responsible, and they were
Mm.
learning.
But they
And
have this kind of really organized, and what I kind of saw from documentaries and listening to interviews from John Mayall was the fact that he was really organized, and it was just a job to him. It was like a day job. It's just like, forget all the rubbish. You're tired. No, just get on the road and do it. And his attitude was,
well,
I want to be on the road and do as many gigs as possible that I can
I
fit
think
into that.
if he just decided to stay in Manchester in that treehouse at his parents' place, we wouldn't be talking here. Eric Clapton,
Mm,
none of the music that you play, I don't think any of it would have happened. And
no.
he came down to London, and yeah, he was very meticulous. I heard the other lovely story about him was in terms of organizing the bands and the gigs. I have to say he was a very passionate player. Once he was up on stage, the performance was absolutely 100%, and he was really into the music, passionate and loved it. But he was also a businessman. He had a clicker. You must know the story
Yeah,
where
yeah.
he
Same
stood
as
outside. For
yeah.
people that don't know, he was worried about, oh, we didn't get money in tonight, John. It was only 74. Well, I clicked 214 times or something. he would stand by the doorway as people were coming in and click each time somebody came in, a punter. He'd send the band on, they'd be playing their first number, and then he'd wait till the last minute, run through the audience, jump onto stage, get behind the keyboard. Okay. So he'd know exactly how many punters they had that night. So he couldn't get ripped off.
I think Brian Jones did the same, didn't he? Did Brian Jones do the same?
Yeah, but he clicked it 4 times for every punter.
And I know that John Mayall and Chris Barber would have a little bit of a sort of friendly competition with each other, because I think John Mayall also played the flamingo as well. I'm pretty sure he did the marquee and the flamingo.
Well, jazz was on the way out and blues was on the way in, and so the Stones were hated. The Cavern in Liverpool was a jazz club, and the Beatles were hated. So they'd have to announce their rock and roll songs as this is a song by, Big Bill Broonzy called. So they'd have to pretend they were singing blues songs, and there was that awkward. Yeah. There was that awkward transition. Alexis Corner was somewhere between the two, where he had a lot of jazz players with him. But I know Danny Thompson was on the scene at the time. Davy Graham as well, who was in the Blues Breakers for a while.
Was Davy Graham really in the Blues Breakers?
An early and very early embryonic version of the Blues Breakers.
Yeah.
And it would have been, I've seen a picture of him on stage. I think he's playing a hollow-bodied electric.
That's really, I'm gonna have to find that. That's amazing.
Very rare photo with John Mayall, but it was not a long-lived thing. It's just that Davy knew Long John Baldry. Anyway, the jazz scene was kind of dying and the blues scene was coming up. And I know Danny Thompson was on a show once, and he said the support band were a load of scruffy orcs called the Rolling Stones. And I thought, good grief, look at them, what a scruffy mob. And then all these soppy girls screaming their heads off. But he realised at the end of the gig, the promoter came up and said, nice gig, guys, don't come back next week. And the Stones were suddenly headlining. And it was quite brutal. And John, even though he was more of that age group of the jazzers, he loved the blues, and it was a minority thing. So he was, again, a trailblazer.
And a really good thing, James, about John Mayall was that whenever he was interviewed and said, oh, you're the godfather of British blues, he said no. He said Cyril Davis and Alexis Cornet. He'd always mention them.
No, they were. No, that's true.
He'd always give them credit, and he would never... If you said to him, you created British blues, he said, no, it wasn't me. It was Cyril Davis. Because we don't want to get into an argument of, where blues comes from. We know where the whole history of blues, America, whatever. We're really focusing here on British blues and the interpretation of John Mayall's, in the 1960s, listening to all those great blues albums.
Yeah. And I mean, his inspiration, I think he was, he listened to a lot of early stuff, the early jazz and the early blues, but, his voice was very, I think Otis Rush, So Many Roads.
Yeah.
That you can hear where John Mayall got a lot of his phrasing from there.
That's
and obviously
really
Peter Green got a lot of his guitar style. We were saying before we started rolling here that we both watched Eric Clapton speaking about John today, and both got a bit misty-eyed because I knew that he'd been good to Eric, but I think just people need to take a look at that and hear the story. But he took Eric in, and Eric did the same thing that Peter Green did later of staying at John Mayall's pad. Come and stay. It's in Paddington, I think. And they'd stay up all night listening to this amazing collection of blues records. And that's,
he was an encyclopedic collection of everything.
Yeah, he had these collections of things. Blues records was one of them. So yeah, I guess if we go back to the beginning, Davy Graham was in the first lineup.
That's incredible.
And I don't think there was anything recorded.
Right.
But they were both getting their teeth into, and I think they were both on Decca. Davy Graham's
because they're jazz
albums. So they would have known
jazz and blues, I think.
Same engineers like Gus Dudgeon worked with Davy Graham, who also worked on the Blues Breakers albums, and then
and the Beatles. Did he do the Beatles or not? Gus Dudgeon.
I don't know. I don't know. No. I don't think he did.
Right.
Somebody with a similar, but I've not researched all of this thoroughly, but I think that everyone knew each other, and the club scene was quite. People just knew. Everyone knew one another. It was like a little community, and then there'd be the sort of folk pocket and the jazz pocket.
Yeah.
And sometimes the two would merge, and John was very good at merging jazz and blues. listening to a bunch of different things.
Because of course, I mean, not forgetting that, a lot of the blues greats came over to England, before even the Blues Breakers were a thing, and even and the early John Mayall's Blues Breakers, I think in 1964, he toured with John Lee Hooker.
Yeah, I
And that
believe
was before
so.
Clapton. That was because Clapton joined in 65 and left in 66.
Well, John Lee came over, and I think that the Yardbirds they backed up Sonny Boy Williamson, who famously said these white boys want to play the blues so bad, and they play the blues so bad. But I'm not sure he was in. I'm not sure he was in the Blues Breakers at the time when he was playing with Hooker. I was before Eric was in the band, I think.
Yeah, well, I think that, there was another, because there was also the I think the Groundhogs and John Mayall played.
Oh,
with,
the Groundhogs were good with Hooker. They played well with Hooker.
And I think John Mayall joined them in 72 or something. But I think in 1964 it was John Lee Hooker definitely played at the Roundhouse with. There's a few cool photos.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Hooker.
This is the Roundhouse pub, not the Roundhouse in Camden.
Yeah, and John Lee and John Mayall's playing at the Hammond.
Yeah.
When John Lee Hooker's doing his thing with an old Epiphone.
Must have sounded fabulous.
Yeah, but that was before Clapton. It's a shame because, I guess Clapton just missed out on doing that.
Well, Clapton played with Hooker later on, I think, didn't he? I think they got to know each other later on.
Yeah.
Much later on.
And then he obviously played with, Clapton played with Howlin' Wolf, didn't he, at the London sessions?
Yeah.
The whole, the famous, if you got, because I remember buying the album and you had that cut.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna sing you a song now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because you hear them putting it together and somebody can't get it right. And
Eric's swearing a little bit here and there.
Yeah, and Howlin' Wolf's going, "That ain't right. No, that ain't right. It's like this."
Some of those sessions worked and some of them didn't.
Yeah.
But that was a project, the London sessions. There was the Howling Wolf one, the BB King one, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, that Peter was on with Duster Bennett. But yeah, so John, Eric Clapton feeling the need for authenticity in his life and in his music. And he was talking about that earlier, how John Mayall said, don't be afraid to do the music you want and don't try and please other people. Do what you believe in.
That's a very profound
and I think that was really instilled in him. And so Eric was struggling with the Yardbirds, who were, like a lot of bands, trying to do what the Stones had done and morph from being a blues band into a pop group.
Yeah.
The Yardbirds did it very successfully and the Stones did it successfully. Brian Jones wasn't happy about that, but he did great on those Stones records. Even when they went psychedelic and it was embarrassing, Brian Jones still played amazing stuff on those records.
Yeah. I mean, I just love
Eric.
I mean, people just don't forget how great that riff is.
The riff's great. The song is actually the Staples singers. This may be my last time, baby, my last time. I don't know. So they nicked the song, but that riff, very good.
Brian Jones.
And Brian Jones put a blues song at the top of the charts.
Exactly.
Little Red Rooster, and it was such a great version as well.
Yeah,
it's eerie. It's eerie.
Yeah.
So John Mayall was at the forefront of that, and I think Eric was looking for something that was meaningful. He's spoken also, Eric Clapton, about how because of his childhood, he really distrusted authority and authority figures, and John Mayall was that. So Eric was a little bit blasé and, well, I'll turn up if I feel like it. No, I'm going on holiday with these guys. I'm forming another band. And so that put John in an awkward position. And Eric, he didn't just stop drinking and taking drugs. He also looked at himself and he actually went and made amends to John and apologized for being a dick.
Yeah.
But at the time, John was put in that position, and it was the first of many, many times where he had the greatest guitar player. I mean, and he had to find someone else quickly. And there were a couple of
the next
other
greatest
people.
guitar player.
Well, Peter who we'll talk about a little bit later, lived up the road from the Pontiac Club in Putney. One of the great things that happened with Peter was moving out of Bethnal Green to Putney meant that he was near Richmond, he was near Kingston, he was near Fulham and Notting Hill on bus rides away.
That's where can I just say, my grandmother and all my family from my grandmother's side are from Fulham.
Well, yeah, there we go. I mean, Peter got a job in a butcher shop in Fulham, so he worked there. But at the weekends, John Mayall's Blues Breakers would play at the Pontiac Club, which was at the top of Putney High Street. It's still a club there.
Because Fulham is next to Chelsea, and Fulham is where the poor people lived, and Chelsea was where the richer people lived.
Well, that's right. And Chelsea was quite poor with the Stones squatted there, didn't they?
Yeah.
But
it was a bit more affluent.
Peter was in this position where he could easily go and see the Stones in Richmond, easily go and see the Yardbirds playing up the road. And the Pontiac Club was literally a 10-minute walk from Peter's flat. And John Mayall played there. One of the last gigs he did with Eric Clapton was there. And I think it may have been there that Peter Green was stood there looking at the guy that John had got in to replace Eric. So I'm better than him. What about me? Well, give me a chance, And John Mayall said, he's been such a pain in the arse that I just thought, well, okay, I'll give him a shot. And of course, he did that beautiful thing, the parental thing with Peter, of encouraging him, nurturing him. He recognized this guy needs someone to guide him and mentor him, because he doesn't really have, I know Peter's parents loved him, but they probably weren't able to advise him. And even his older brother, Mickey, who was a guitar player, Peter needed somebody like John to say, okay, come and stay with me, listen to these. And when, I think the other thing that happened was when they turned up, because the Beano album came out, and I think it's a toss-up between the Beano album and the Dog in the Dustbin as to what the greatest British blues albums of all time are. This is an argument that people have.
Well, on what I posted on my Facebook today, James, was when I was 17, I bought the big three: Beano, Hard Road, and Crusade.
Of course, Crusade
with
Mick Taylor.
With Mick Taylor.
So the Hard Road, the Beano album came out, and that's the one where the Blues Breakers are sitting against a wall, and Eric Clapton has written on the wall behind him, "Harold Wilson is a nit." And it's shocking to think now that was thought to be, we can't have that. That's because
he was Harold Wilson was a Labour government, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. Yeah. I think they thought he was a bit of a grifter, getting photographed with the Beatles and trying to be in with the kids and stuff. So so you can see the word, but it's had to be scrubbed off the wall. So that's that famous album, that album cover where they're sitting there. Yeah. And someone's had to, before they take the picture, someone's had to clean it off the wall.
Yeah.
But that's the album that everyone had.
Me and my friend Bob, we because I live pretty near to West Hampstead. I have to go through West Hampstead literally 3 times a week, and that's where they recorded the Blues Breakers album. Yeah. And I've always tried to find that wall, but I just can't find it.
Oh, I don't think it was photographed. There's somebody, I don't know where the picture was taken.
Apparently it was.
Was
it
there?
They went around the corner, They went around the corner.
It's probably a Tesco Express now, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
But that album came out, and I mean, the guy that taught me to play the guitar, Brian, I think he didn't get expelled, but he got suspended at assembly at school for putting "Have You Heard" from the Beano album on full blast at assembly over the speakers when they were supposed to be singing a hymn. And that, a lot of people are saying, just the sound that Eric got on that track, on that John Mayall album, changed everybody's lives. And Peter Green would have been listening to that and looking at Eric and looking at the guitar that Eric had. He grew the sideburns like Eric. He got the guitar, he got everything like
the Marshall. He got the Marshall.
He got himself kitted up to replace Eric Clapton, and went and stood there and placed himself in front of him. Here I am, and you've got to have some bottle to do that. And he lived up to it. And John, on the first day of the session with Peter, Mike Vernon, "What are you doing? Who is this?" "Oh, we got someone better than Eric Clapton. He's better than Eric. You'll see." And I think that would have made a big difference to Peter Green. He would have heard that and gone, "This guy's got my back. This guy, John Mayall's got my back." I'm going to be all right.
But Peter had a lot of confidence anyway in that time. He was.
Yeah, but I think that
he
made
was
a big
very
difference.
confident. He
I
was
think his
because he came
confidence
from,
would have
he
been
was
built up.
he was fighting. He was a butcher's son. He was from the school
Yeah,
of hard
but
knocks.
we all know he was quite an insecure guy as well.
I think that definitely came out later.
Those things are, I think those things that Mayall did, those are pivotal moments in people's lives.
Yeah.
And of course, Mike Vernon, you know, John Mayall didn't have to do that. He could have let Peter defend himself, aged 19, verbally, you know, listen to this guy. And actually, Peter, I think Peter learned a lot about being a good band leader from John.
Well, what John did was let all three guitar players, he let all three play and express themselves. And that's what, and John, and if you listen to interviews with John, you hear John Mayall saying, you know, I let them develop. When they were with me, you know, when they were with my tenure, they had a chance to come in and just develop as a guitar player.
That's what a good band leader will do. And the other thing was, I think he had Ainsley Dunbar playing drums at the time.
Yeah.
And he had John McVie,
McVie,
the best blues bass player. My God, that guy was great.
Best rhythm section.
But you've got Ainsley Dunbar, who was a bit jazzy and a bit fiddly. And he played a gig with the band, came off stage, and Peter Green told the story that Ainsley Dunbar went up to John Mayall afterwards and said, "Any money about?" He said, "I'm sorry to tell you, actually, Ainsley, that was your last gig with us tonight."
You ever played?
And Mick Fleetwood said, "I was at that gig and they asked me to join," and I felt, what? But I think that Mayall understood the chemistry between John McVie and Mick Fleetwood and Peter Green. He could see that, let's get these three guys seem to be forming. There's something interesting happening here.
Because also going back, he also played with Jack Bruce.
Yeah.
John Mayall played with Jack Bruce, you know?
Well, I think Jack was involved for a short while. And because John McVie left eventually when Peter formed Fleetwood Mac. He didn't want to leave because the money was good, and he knew that he could rely on John Mayall for regular gigs, decent wage. But I think John was quite strict with McVie, wasn't he? Once Mick Fleetwood joined the band and they were both boozing, there was the incident where
he got kicked out.
Well, the famous story is he got thrown out of the van on the motorway. Well, I don't think it was like that. John Mayall just stopped the van, probably for the sake of the safety of everyone in that van, and made John McVie wait at a bus stop because he was so drunk. He used to turn somersaults and do all sorts of nutty things when he was tipsy. So eventually Mick Fleetwood got the boot because he wasn't quite ready yet. He wasn't quite ready. If you listen to some of those, you know, the live recordings that have come out recently of Blues Breakers gigs in London.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've been listening.
Aren't they amazing?
Stuff, yeah,
and that's Fleetwood Mac with John Mayall on the.
mean, I'm building a JTM 45, James, based on the Clapton and Peter Green amp, which is all. I've been buying all the old radio spares parts from old boys' sheds in their back gardens. Radio guys, all the amps, everything's made out of 1965 parts.
Amazing.
On radio spares, and a guy up in a genius electrician, electronical engineer up in Blackburn is making it. So I'm keeping it all made in England with English made components.
Hey,
it's 100% English.
I knew you'd been busy since I last saw you. I've got to tell everybody, I was doing a gig. It was Jamie Renton's 60th, and this guy turned up to play, and I got him up on stage with me. Ramon here. Oh man, you were so good that night.
Oh, God bless you, man.
I was listening back to the other night, and we hadn't rehearsed, we hadn't played, we didn't know. You didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing, and I listened to it for the first time last night. Funnily,
it's a beautiful like township song, wasn't it? You played.
Oh, I can't remember.
Guys, James is a really good picker. He's a red hot picker, man. He's got a beautiful picking style.
Doing some African palm wine music. I'm putting a little band together soon. I'm seeing a drummer on Friday. Great stuff. The thing of being a band leader. I mean, Peter learnt a lot from John Mayall about how to be fair, but also John wouldn't tolerate drunkenness. And when Peter was putting Fleetwood Mac together, he had Mick was insecure. And there were times when Mick was playing. There was a very famous time when Mick was completely lost. Peter just went behind him and grabbed his hands, not patronizingly, but just got him back on the beat. But so he was being fair. But also, if Mick had had too much to drink, he'd say, "Look, you're drunk out your mind, mate." I can't swear on your show. But also Bob Brunning, who we both knew, when they were first rehearsing with Fleetwood Mac at I think it was the Bull's Head or something, or the Black Bull in Fulham. Bob Brunning went for his second or third pint, and Peter was like, "Stop. You don't do that when you're with me."
I play in band. I play in a band, and someone else says that to me. Hey, we've got 1 minute left, and we're gonna end this video. What are your last thoughts on John Mayall?
Oh boy, he wanted to live as long as possible, playing and enjoying life as long as he possibly could, and he succeeded, because the last clip of him I saw playing and singing, he hadn't lost any of his touch, his voice. That's a good example of someone that enjoys being on this planet, enjoys what it has to offer. And he was a survivor when his house caught fire in 1979. You know that story. There were the wildfires.
We're going to have to leave it because we've got 10 seconds left. So thanks a million.
Well, rest in peace, John. Then
thanks a million, James. And we're going to come back tomorrow, and we're going to talk about Peter Green. So until then,
that's a good idea. I've got to get some sleep now.
Bye. Take care. Bye.